So what was going on in the original version of Daredevil Born Again? We know the show got a massive creative overhaul, which has led to a lot of speculation online. And now at the start of the series, Charlie Cox has explained this complicated creative overhaul and even a little bit of ambition to team up with Spider-Man. So let's dive in to talk about what he said, what's going on with Daredevil, and what he revealed about this massive overhaul that's basically changed the face of the MCU. Now, quite honestly, for the longest period of time after the Netflix show's closed shop, we all didn't really anticipate Charlie Cox fighting his way into the MCU. Then, within the last 18 months, he's appeared in No Way Home, She-Hulk Attorney at Law, Echo, and even decided to voice the character for your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man before taking up the role again in Daredevil Born Again. So the future for the man without fear in the MCU is looking pretty bright, and we're all really wondering if he shows up in Doomsday, Secret Wars, or even Spider-Man 4. Now, recently, Charlie Cox made it to Fan Expo Chicago, and he talked a ton of Spider-Man and Daredevil to the crowd. Now, as many of you know, it's been reported for a while that Daredevil 4 is going to feature him returning as the character to team up with Spider-Man to take on the Kingpin. But as of right now, those plans could have changed considering the lead-in to Secret Wars, and that might be saved for a future installment. Now, what's interesting is during one of those panels, Charlie Cox talked a little bit about the creative overhaul. During this process, writers Chris Ord and Matt Corman were fired by Marvel Studios, along with the show's directors, and basically the whole thing was rebooted, leading to a lot of fan speculation. Cox was asked actually directly about these behind-the-scenes changes, and his response was nothing but classy, but not that informative. He said, "I'm not going to answer that just because it's more complicated. I've read online how that information was received, and the truth of the matter is, it was a lot more complicated than that. A lot of the material we shot pre-strike is brilliant, and is still in the show, and works really well. There were just some complicated factors around what we had been tasked to do, and what we were discovering was and wasn't working. I would hate to answer that, and then make it sound like what people were doing before the changes were made was not good or wrong. It's just more complicated than that. I think what I'll say is credit to Marvel that they looked at the episodes and could acknowledge that we still could do better, and that we maybe need to go in a slightly different direction. That's just how it is. We are so lucky to be working for a company that is willing to do that and spend money to get there, but where we ended up felt really good." Now, I can really appreciate this answer from Charlie Cox because I really don't like it when people throw other people under the bus, especially in a creative process. Now, we do know Dario Scartapane took over for Ord and Corman, and they had worked on The Punisher once before, while directors Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, who worked on Moon Knight and Loki, came on board to finish the show. But nowhere in the statement did Charlie Cox praise or criticize anyone. I actually think he's probably got a very good point here, and it's Marvel's reevaluating of quality over quantity, a change in senior leadership at Disney, and a refocus on what's important. Well, that contributed to the overall as much as anything else. Remember, when the show first kicked off, there was a lot of feedback from fans, and we were hearing some major elements of the original Netflix shows were not part of it. I'm pretty sure when Marvel viewed the final product, they probably found our concerns very valid, and that really drove the decision to make the changes. Now again, Cox didn't blame anybody here, but it is nice to get some insight into what was going on behind the scenes. I think this is an absolutely professional move on Marvel's part, and what needed to happen. If this show was a total flop, honestly, I don't know how Marvel would recover. The original Daredevil series is still considered by many to be the best superhero show ever, and upon rewatch, it's pretty easy to feel that way. That show was special, and they're kind of treading on holy ground, so they have to get it right, and the fact that Marvel is taking that seriously, well, that's exactly what I want to hear as a fan. Now, as far as Spider-Man goes, well, Charlie Cox is still pretty enthusiastic, and clearly wants this team up to happen. But pretty much all he shared was hopes. In that same Fan Expo interview, he actually talked some about Spider-Man and said, "Being in the Spider-Man movie felt like a big step just in terms of a lot of people referencing that when I met them. I guess you can't underestimate how much it means when these characters have a history in the comics. When we get to collide on screen, it really means a lot to fans, and I get that. I feel that way now as well myself. So the Spider-Man thing is such an iconic thing. The idea of Matt Murdock and Peter Parker together is just so iconic. I hope that in the future we get to do some more stuff together because that is really fun. That's the main thing, just that those opportunities can arise." Now, we've been hearing for a long time that Marvel has some street level plans manifesting behind the scenes. And Kevin Feige has flat out said those street heroes will be led by Spider-Man and Daredevil. So I have absolute faith these characters are going to get together sometime soon. The big question becomes when. With Secret Wars around the corner, this is very likely to be post-Secret Wars. But I am not alone in wanting to see this team up, seeing Matt and Peter face off against Wilson Fisk in a New York where he is mayor and heroes are outlawed. That sounds like a pretty great story and could definitely leave a nice stamp on the MCU and give fans some of the service they absolutely want. What do you guys think? Are you excited to see Daredevil return once again? And how do you feel about Charlie Cox's explanation for the behind-the-scenes issues and, honestly, his lack of blame? Sound off in the comments below.